Oh, what a day! What a lovely day!
Welcome to Flat Earth Debate Live. I'm your host Nathan Oakley, and if you are new to this channel, or you've not done so already, then be sure to subscribe and hit the bell notification icon to keep up to date with the Flat Earth Debate. If you'd like to join the community debate, then go to nathanoakley.com and check out the Flat Earth Debate Forum. If you'd like to support this channel, there is a super chat that runs alongside each of these shows while they are live, and there's also a PayPal, Patreon and crypto link in the info box below the video. Most importantly, if you'd like to join the discussion, simply mute the page you are currently watching, then click the link in the info box below this video to join the panel and express your views on the shape of the Earth. If you do join, please don't swear. If you do, you'll be ejected, and if you are, please don't try to rejoin the stream using sock accounts. You'll be warmly welcome back on the next stream. Please also share the show on social media. Sharing the show obviously increases the live audience, but this in turn increases the chances of a more diverse panel, so please share the show. And one last time, if you're new to the channel or you've not done so already, then be sure to subscribe and hit the bell notification icon to keep up to date with the Flat Earth Debate. Now, we are joined by 10th Man, Sleeping Warrior, Travis, Right the Hand, Physics Warrior, Paul, Michael, Chocolate Sane, Arwin, and that's pretty much it. Very good to have you all.
Hello. Greetings, everybody.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
What do you do?
Not literally hello, but hello.
Hello.
Hello. Let's rattle through housekeeping, hopefully relatively quickly. Any signs of Earth curvature?
There's no signs of Earth curvature, but you can act as though there is.
Don't make me laugh on this housekeeping. I want to do it quickly.
No proof, Nathan.
God. Don't.
I presuppose so.
Oh no.
I think Riley should answer all the questions
Oh, it's
since he
gone
did
already.
such a major victory.
Yeah.
Right, it's just I can feel the tears coming already. Right. Any signs of axial rotation?
There are no signs of axial rotation, but you can think of axial rotation as though it's there.
Okay.
Only when I'm drunk.
What about the distance to the sun?
There's no evidence that the sun is a real tangible object, but you can think of it as though it's a real physical tangible object.
Sweet.
It doesn't exist.
Good answer. Good answer. What about scientific evidence of gravity? Any of that?
Scientific evidence
gravity-
of what?
Quote, gravity is not a force, but you can think of it as a force. George Musser, 2019.
Any evidence of a self-perpetuating molten iron core at the centre of a presupposed spherical Earth?
There is no evidence of a molten iron core, but you can think of being real evidence for it.
Close now. Any evidence that you can have gas pressure without the necessary antecedent of a container?
Yes, unicorn farts.
Other than unicorn farts?
There is no evidence that you can have gas pressure next to a vacuum, but you can pretend as though there is.
It's not literal, but you can think of it as actually existing. That's lovely.
Yep.
Okay, where were we? Any evidence of the R value?
There is no evidence of R, but you can act as though there is.
R.
Okay, that's pretty much it. So
Just
just
you
for
can
the,
doesn't mean you should.
just for the audience's information, some of the answers were referencing George Musser and his double speak nonsense over on Fight the Flat Earth channel. So check out Fight the Flat Earth, go over there, subscribe, check out his video, give it a like. But he managed
Shout out
to
retracted. Shout out retracted.
look. I just want to get something clear, right? When it comes to other YouTubers, and that's what I view Craig as in this regard, he's another YouTuber who is working hard and has had a good guest. In that regard, don't retract this shout out. Go over to Fight the Flat Earth channel, check it out, like his video, enjoy the content. Thank you, Craig, for producing that content. I am looking forward to watching it. I don't think I've ever watched your channel, but I will be. I may even subscribe depending on how hysterically you embarrass yourself.
Hey Nathan, we can act as though it's not been retracted. No, we can act as though it's not been retracted. No, I've messed it all up now.
It's not retracted, but you can think
Yeah,
of
the
that.
shout out retracted has not been retracted, but you can think of it as been retracted.
Excellent.
I'll be right back, guys.
Wow, this is getting very confusing.
It is
That
very
was
confusing.
We're
by
just
a
trying to
science-
show. We're just trying to
science-
show the audience how it's double speak.
Yeah, exactly. That's the thing with doublespeak, Arwin. It's very confusing.
I'd like to shout out to Gem Panda's Discord.
That's definitely getting a retracted shout out.
Definitely retract. I'm fighting for that Discord. Gem's doing a pretty good work on that. It's kind of tough, but
You're joking. Last time I went in there, I lasted about 15 minutes before he interrupted me like 4 times. And the final interruption was because I accidentally said astrology instead of astronomy. Like that's the biggest misspeak ever. And he had to jump in when I told him like 3 more times, please don't interrupt me. Let me get my words out. Then you can respond. And I accidentally said astrology. Wow.
he
You
did
mean
apologize.
literally,
He did
literally or
apologize.
non-literally?
Yeah, it was literally.
Yeah, I
Well, he
remember
did
it as.
apologize.
You said it, but you can take it as if you didn't.
I like Nathan's comment here of going and subscribing. I'm going to go subscribe to his channel because he's doing more hurt on the ballers than we are.
Is there a link?
I
to
don't know.
that
I don't know
channel?
about that. Hold on. You're saying he's doing more damage than we are? Come on. Hey,
Well,
Michael. How you
after
doing?
after this show, everything he said prior to this show, you can just flush down the toilet. This was his coup de grace to take down Sleeping Warrior, and it just took him down.
Yeah, I'll back that up. Like, I want to thank Craig, Fight the Flat Earth, for bringing Mr. George Musser on to explain to us how gravity is not a force. Multiple times, guys. Multiple. So, next time you ballers decide to say, oh, gravity is a force, you might want to listen to that because that was presented by the one and only Fight the Flat Earth.
Listen, I need to report back here. I did say in the interval that Rumpus was due to come on, right? Get this, right? I've asked him to come on, and he said, but Nathan will just meet me, and I have promised to go on Jose's for the first time for a week in 10 minutes. I'm like, okay, no. And this is my response. I said, no, okay, no worries. We have a weight issue, though. Weighting, like, as in weight as a force. And his response was, I will be making a refutation video of your density and gravity confusions very soon. I said, that's not the point. The point is that you say weight is a force, density is not a force. And then he says, that is the point. Weight is a force, density is not. Now, this is where Rumpus has moved the goalposts. Has anybody ever heard Rumpus describe this, what he normally says in this context? Nathan, prick your ears up. So his point, he says, that is the point. Weight is a force, density is not. Gravitational force is, of course, a manifestation of the curvature of space-time, a fictitious force, but it manifests itself as real as any force in reality. Has he ever said that before?
Well, he's saying it's a fictitious force.
But it manifests itself as a real force in reality.
Well, a
Have you
fictitious.
ever heard Rumpus describe it like that?
Hold on.
Saying it's aberration.
Hold on. So a fictitious force is like an apparent force. So the Coriolis force isn't actually a force. Yeah? In the same way, it's not actually deviating. It just looks like it is. Not deviating. So he's saying it's not a force? Fictitious force. Not a force. Well done, Rumpus.
Yeah.
So not a force. Yeah, that's what we're saying.
So I've just said, ha ha ha, you are wrong, dude. Double speaking, pseudoscience, bullshit, wanker. Because that is what Rumpus is. And all of these pretender clowns. John is absolutely right when he calls them all pretender clowns. Because gravity's not a force.
Why did you
But
ask
they all
Rumpus?
count for it in the maths, don't they?
Quote, air is not the atmosphere. Why would you ask that idiot?
Because he's the one that's, you know, like, right, I always get criticised by people on their side for not listening, or for, I've heard Rumpus say things like, you tell him what the answer is, and a week later he's forgotten it. It's not like a week later I've forgotten it. It's a week later his position is not changed because you haven't presented enough evidence to persuade me that your correct answer is actually correct. So I revert back to the previous point, which is you haven't proven your point, and he thinks that means I've forgotten. But what I do remember is when Rumpus says things like, weight is a force, density is not a force. Well, if weight is a force, and weight's got little g in it in the arithmetic to give it the force status, but you've got George Musser telling you that gravity is not actually a force, then weight can't be a force, can it? Because it's got gravitational in it and little g in it, and that's what makes it a force. But if Musser says it's not a force, it's something else, then weight can't be a force. So when I say in the past that weight's been hijacked, the colloquial term weight, that we all know what we mean when we say it, science has hijacked it with little g. That's true. But if little g is not actually a force, then that means that Rumpus is wrong when he said in the past, weight is a force, density is not a force, because weight's not actually a force, is it? So in other words, what that now means is, the Cavendish experiment's out the window, because even if mass does attract mass, it's not gravity that's doing it, because gravity is not a force. So let's just give them, for arguments, just for the sake of making my point here, let's give them that weight does attract mass. Let's give them that the Cavendish experiment, that's not really an experiment, let's just give them that does do what they claim it does. Gravity is not a force, so it can't be gravity causing it, because Georgie Musser said so. So stick that in your pipe and smoke it, because whatever Cavendish is doing or not doing, it ain't proving gravity, because gravity's not a force, is it? So let's not forget that anymore. Let's start putting Cavendish in the bin where it belongs and reminding everybody it's the curvature of space-time and not an imaginary force, because Georgie Musser snapped the wand in two and Craig thinks he was holding his willy.
Just remember, the not actual size of the sun won't change. It's non-actual size from not actual position as it moves through the sky.
Come on, Nathan, say that sentence for 10th man.
Well, no, it's their question, isn't it? Their question is, why does the not actual size of the sun not change its not actual size as it moves from its not actual position? So they would say something like, why doesn't the sun change its angular size throughout the day? Well, when we're arguing on the ground about curve calculations and they're using actual sizes that don't change with distance, they're fixed regardless of how far they are, because it's an actual size, feet and inches, meters. Well, things do change angular size as you get further away from them. That's our argument on the ground. Well, what's angular size? Not actual size. So when they're talking about the angular size of the sun and why it would or wouldn't change, they're saying, why does the not actual size of the sun not change its not actual size as it moves from its not actual position, because the sun has an apparent position. So it's not where you actually see it. It's a not actual position. It's an apparent position. So as it moves throughout the day through its not actual positions towards the horizon. And what's the horizon again? Something that's also not actual. So it descends the question of why does the angular size of the sun not change? Who cares? What do you think that proves, you bonehead?
Can I just also correct the original assertion?
I love it.
Let me just correct the original assertion, right? When the ballers claim that the angular size of the sun does not change throughout the day, Dave Marsh has measured it with a solar filter on, and the angular size of the sun does change throughout the day. They tell you it doesn't, in the same way that they say that the Etvos effect is a thing. But the actual evidence does not agree with the assertion. The angular size of the sun does change throughout the day. It does change.
So the actual evidence shows that the not actual size of the sun does change its not actual size as it moves throughout the day. This is all very interesting.
Yeah. So, and let's not forget that angular size is a sum, right? It's not simply a measurement. You need to know the distance to have the phrase angular size. Otherwise, you've just got an angle. And I got this. This is the first time I really got gaslighted. When we were talking about angular size, they were ignoring the maths and telling me that I'd misunderstood it and laughing at me. And I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? It's literally in front of your nose there. You need to know the distance. It's the apparent size from a distance, a given set distance. That bit needs to be there. And they're all telling me I've got this wrong, and they're laughing at me and trying to make out that I'm stupid. And I doubled down on it, and I said, and I'm doubling again, tripling and quadrupling down. Angular size is a sum. It's not just a measurement. So what they then do is say, it's not a sum, is it, Riley? Because sum is plus, right? And what I mean when I say it's a sum, it's an arithmetic, right? It's a formula. It's something else that's more than just measuring the angle. And they focus on that word sum because it's dead simple for us to understand the concept. And they say they try and use that against me to discredit the point I'm making, but it doesn't work. The reality is you need to know the distance to get the angular size or the apparent size. If you don't know the distance, you've got an infinitely variable scale where that sun could be small and close, or it could be much, much, much bigger, but miles further away. And of course, they tell us it's miles further away and much, much bigger. But the reality is, you can see sunspots with a P900 and a solar filter. So it can't be that far away, because them sunspots, I mean, you don't know how big they are, but they look small relative to the sun. But those sunspots are a thing, right? And we can see it with a P900 and a lens filter, a solar filter. So yeah, angular size is a sun, boys and girls. It's not just measuring the angle. Don't let them tell you that it is. Double speaking wankers.
Indeed. We know so little about the sky. We can see it and what it does and have seen it and what it does for a very long time, as far as I can establish. So when you were struggling with astronomy versus astrology, the way I tried to remember it was logic and naming. So astrology being the logic of it, which they established a very long time ago. Now they just go around naming shit. So astronomy. I'm gonna name that,
which according to Brenda is science.
I'm gonna name that a black hole. I'm gonna call that a black hole.
That's science. You just performed science, Nathan.
See that light? I'm gonna call that a gas. So that's what astronomy is.
Are you referring to the actual sky or the non-actual sky?
Yeah. And when they see that light in the non-actual sky, they're then going to claim that that's proof of gas pressure in a vacuum. And we're like, what do you mean it's a light in the sky, dickhead? But if they believe that that light in the sky is a gas giant, then yeah, I can see the logic behind saying that that's proof of gas pressure in a vacuum. You need to prove that it is a gas giant in a vacuum to say that it's true. You can't just spitball it back as that's the official explanation. We need to see that it's true. That's what science does. It proves things. It doesn't disprove things. It can disprove things. That's what the null hypothesis is for. But the hypothesis proves things. So when these morons say science doesn't prove things, ask them, what does the null hypothesis do?
So it's an affirming the consequent formal logical fallacy, like all of them. So if we can have gas in a vacuum, I will observe a light in the sky. I observe a light in the sky, therefore we can have gas in a vacuum. Circular reasoning. If P then Q, Q therefore P, and affirming the consequent formal logical fallacy.
I can't tell you the consequences of that Musser now, not doubling down, but basically saying that gravity is not a force. The effects are wide-reaching. All the calculations that include little g, right? That literally it brings them all to the forefront, because one of them is weight. Rumpus pushes that weight's a force, and he said it so many times. If you're not familiar with the show, it is his mantra, right? That's why I remember it. It's his mantra, and it's his get out. But that also tells me that Rumpus absolutely knows that is the point. That's where he's argued it for that long, that he believes that's his win, right? Or he knows absolutely that he's lying, and that's the point where the counter comes from, and he needs to keep us away from that at all costs by dogmatically and religiously asserting it, because weight is a force, really? So it's like saying, praise Helios, and that the effects are huge. It also means, from Jaren's point of view, everyone's talking about like whether or not relative density is creating forces or not, or whatever, that relative density argument. Well, if gravity is not a force and it needs some kind of bias to get the acceleration initially, then whatever might be causing it, be it electromagnetic or otherwise, it's definitely not gravity causing it, because gravity is not a force. It doesn't make things do things. So whatever's going on with the relative density point, it's not gravity doing anything. It might be electromagnetic. Who cares? It's definitely not gravity doing it. So thanks, Georgie Musser, that we can cross-reference and apply that everywhere. Shout-outs to Georgie Musser.
Well, not only did Georgie Musser did what we're all talking about, but inadvertently, he's changed little g and big G for little m and big M. Magic.
Yeah.
And then he says, it's supported by the underlying science. Okay, I want to see this underlying science for the little m and big M that replace little g and big G. Show it.
See, the thing is, underlying science isn't part of, that's the definition of pseudoscience. Underlying science is pseudoscience because it's not based on scientific method. That's the definition I always put on screen, because it's dead simple and we all get it. We're not all sticking to it at the minute. It's filtering through. People are using it, but we need to adopt it because it's a phrase that kills the ball. Anything that's not based on scientific method, be that natural science and the breeding patterns of birds, As credible as that sounds for science, it's not based on scientific method. So by definition, it's pseudoscience. So it's the same for all aspects of science. So what underlying science, that's not based on scientific method, is it? That's based on underlying science. So whatever underlying science is or isn't, it's definitely not based on scientific method. And if it's not based on scientific method, unfortunately, it's pseudoscience.
Well, yeah, but George Musser is using it, and this is why QE and Nathan jump all over everybody who says science, and they don't want to go through the scientific method.
Correct. So, because scientific method is the difference between fake science and real science. And obviously all this stuff to do with the shape of the Earth and all the galaxies and all the convection currents of Venus. I mean, how can you get a thesis? How can you get a PhD on something that it's got absolutely no science to it whatsoever? Where is the science? Spectroscopy. Right. What's it proving, right? What is it proving? Is it complying with scientific method? No, not really. There's no practical experimentation possible.
Did you say his thesis was on the convection currents of Venus?
Yeah.
Okay, well, if you can't measure gravity between two planets, because you can't, how does he get the convection currents between us and Venus?
It must have a nuclear core that's self-perpetuating, and it must be based on our core because it's the same size. So therefore, I can logically and reasonably infer that it must have the same device that we've apparently got.
In other words, unicorns.
Yeah, it makes a mockery of science.
Yeah, but he said that the in between the distances, there's no application of this force. It can't be measured.
Yeah, but what? Yeah, are you on the same page with convection currents of Venus's mantle? We're on about the internal composition of Venus, and he's claiming the convection currents of it.
Well, if I want to get on the show, I've got to have an internet connection, and that's how you're hearing me. He wants to tell me about the convection currents of Venus, and he's telling me that the force that keeps the planets in their alignment can't be measured in between because it's not really there. It's not literal. So how in the world does he get his hands-on real science to measure the convection currents of Venus?
I don't think he necessarily measured it. I think he hypothesized how it must work based on pseudoscience bullshit nonsense.
No, then I got $1 billion in the bank.
Yeah.
We're getting a reading.
And it's real because you can just think that it's real.
Yeah,
and
it's
if we
just made
start
up.
arguing about the convection currents of Venus against Musser, right, that's effectively like arguing whether Santa prefers mince pies or the brandy.
Yeah, it's real because he made it up himself.
Yeah. The epitome of pseudoscience.
Yeah, this was another death for gravity today. It was sad.
I hope to God Jaron's on his walk right now, and I hope he's listening on his podcast device, whatever it is that he listens to the show on, because he says he often listens to the show first thing in the morning. Jaron, this literally destroys the idea that there is some kind of force that might be attributed to gravity for this density tower thing. Because if there is a force, it's definitely not gravity. It might be something else, but it's definitely not gravity. So let's just give them that there's some other force. It's not the force they're telling us it is. So we'll give Bob his electromagnetic cores. Who cares? It's not gravity. And let's be honest, it changes everything in terms of the maths. It turns it in its practical application. It pigeonholes everything as pseudoscience that's to do with gravity. Literally everything, because it's not actually a force. After all, Einstein's current science is it's the bending of space-time. And as we all know, it's a mathematical construct. It's got no experimental application whatsoever. It's literally arguing what flavor sherry should you give Santa when he comes and drops the presents off at Christmas. That's the context.
I know the point has been made, and I just made it, but it's even more of a death blow because they're just admitting the whole thing was a magic trick from the beginning, and because now they're saying it's magic. They're finally telling us it was a magician telling us about this non-existent gravity. So it's moved. It's fantastic. They're admitting it's magical.
Yeah. They're admitting it's magic, and they're admitting that Einstein snapped the wand. So that puts Cavendish out the window. You can't even argue Cavendish anymore, because if it is a force of some kind attracting it, it can't be gravity, because gravity's not a force. It's a good day to be on our
I
time.
think I understand now why you were so kind of like didn't know what to do at first. You're a little bit surprised because I felt the same way when I was watching it. I was like, wait a minute, is he really saying these things? Did he really just say the third time that gravity is not the force?
Yeah, there's a reason he was cited by us in the first instance. Yeah, there's a reason we bandied his name around, because he uses the Einsteinian nonsense to snap the wand in two when it comes to the Reverend John Mitchell and Cavendish gravity.
Yeah. And to be
And
fair
then he
to Craig,
uses the phrase wand and then comes out and literally says it's magic.
yeah. So, Chocolate,
Like, what?
just clarify what you meant then. Your words then were, that's why I was a little bit surprised while you were a bit confused about the outcomes. I might have butchered what you just said then, but what did you mean then when you said that? Are you referring to when I first originally cited Musser on that document, or are you referring to when
No,
Craig...
no. Almost like I mean today with this video, and you're like, I don't understand how he's trying to box this up as a win. And it's like, I understand, because when I'm listening to it, I'm like, wait a minute, wasn't this guy supposed to come out and like, destroy Sleeping Warrior with his argument? And basically, not only did he back him up, but he literally shitted all over this whole Newtonian gravity principle.
It's the equivalent of you having a 10-1 favourite prize fighter go up against a total underdog, and everybody in the crowd is expecting the 10-1 favourite, whatever, I don't know anything about odds, whatever good odds are, to win. They're expecting the prize fighter to win, so they're all going in there and they're like, right, Mike Tyson's definitely going to win this fight, brilliant, let's watch, see how it goes. And then the underdog absolutely annihilates him, and you can't quite believe your eyes as the skinny dude annihilates Mike Tyson before your very eyes. So at the end of the fight, you can't quite believe what you've just watched. Mike Tyson, 2 black eyes, couple of broken ribs, absolutely been annihilated, stands up, goes up to the side, goes up to the cameras and goes, that was a good win. I did well. I'm really pleased with myself. I won so well. And everyone goes, what? And you can't quite believe your ears. That's what this is the equivalent of.
Yeah, exactly.
It all comes back to the Emperor's new clothes. They just will not admit that he's naked.
Let's put this back into a context that you just used Mike Tyson then, right? The biggest loss that I can remember of Mike Tyson was when he fought Evander Holyfield in the mid-90s. And it was obviously the infamous one where he bit Evander Holyfield's ear. Right, everybody was claiming that Tyson was going to rip him apart, and Evander Holyfield played the tactical role where he was jab and move, pick up points, not necessarily batter your opponent to the floor and give him a black eye. He was just playing tactical boxing, and on that day, tactical boxing won. And Tyson was getting infuriated to the point where he bit his ear and he got disqualified. So that was one of his losses. But everybody had Mike Tyson down as the victory there, in the same way that Craig's been building himself up. Because Moose is going to come in and he's going to kill me and all that. And I was like, okay, I'm all right with, because like I said, there were 3 potential outcomes. One was that Craig wouldn't ask the specific question that we were fighting over, and George would give it a correct answer, an innocent answer, but not address the point and he claimed victory. That was one scenario. The second scenario was that Craig would ask the correct question and Musa would contradict himself. And I thought, he's never going to do that, surely. But that was a possible outcome. He didn't do that either. So, but what's actually happened is Craig's asked the correct question, but Musa's actually reasserted his position, and somehow Craig's not spotted that it doesn't support his position. But he's claiming that it's a massive victory the way that Tyson was supposed to knock out Evander Holyfield. But what's actually happened is Tyson's bit Evander Holyfield's ear got disqualified in the same way that Georgie Musa's bit Fight the Flat Earth's ear. And although he's not been disqualified by the ref, he's basically said, there you go, mate. There's your bit of your ear back. I'll see you in casualty in a bit. And that's what's happened.
I called this. I said this is what would happen. He'd come out, he'd reassert his position exactly as he stated it. He wouldn't support Craig's position. I called this. The only person who elaborated further on that was Quantum Eraser, who said he'll also put his foot in his mouth with every other sentence because he's got a position that's untenable to begin with. So all he can do is make his situation worse. My response to John, and I'll have to concede that John was right and I was wrong. I said, no, he won't. He'll just tentatively reassert his position exactly as he has in the documentation that we cite. And it won't necessarily, aid us any further. He'll just toe the line. I don't think I said it in those exact words, but words similar to that. And John said, no, these crayon munchers have only got to open their mouth and they do themselves a disservice. You watch. And John was absolutely right. And, but I called this. I said he's not going to contradict his position because that would leave him in a very precarious position in his career. So he's never going to do that. And that's what I said would happen. And I was absolutely right, just to say.
I think
Yeah,
ultimately,
I said that too.
however this goes down, right? They'll want to forget this at all costs. They're never going to want to talk about this again. So it's up to us basically to maximize this and ram it down their throats. Because if we don't ram it down their throats and we allow it to die, this is the biggest point that goes against this idea that A, gravity is a force, B, Cavendish proves anything. Because if it does prove something, it's definitely not proving gravity because there is no force of attraction, right? So it kills Cavendish. All these idiots. Honestly, this is a monument. This is a really good day for being on our side.
Definitely.
Because Cavendish is dead.
I don't think it's going to die, considering we were citing him to begin with, and because he was hinting at it being magic, with snaps the wand in two. We love that, right? Well, now he's saying it. He's literally saying it is magic. This is great. Happy days.
Nathan, it's only fair and right that we give credit for the article that this has come from, so people know what we're referring to. Can I put my screen on?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Because the reality is, this is like where is it? Is it in here? Where is it? It must be in Gravity. How Einstein there we go. So this is the article in question. If you're not familiar with the background to it, Einstein's article, right? It's written by Scientific America, George Musser in 2015. It's relatively current. And there's a couple of key phrases in here that I picked up on. Credit to John for pointing this out to me. I didn't know about this until John spotted it. And basically what he says, let's have a look. It's been a while since, it's above that last, there we go. For instance, Einstein created his theory of general relativity, which provides our modern understanding for gravity, with the express purpose of expunging non-locality from physics. Newton's gravity acted at a distance as if by magic, and general relativity snapped the wand in two by showing that the curvature of space-time, and not an invisible force, gives rise to gravitational attraction. That's the citation that I referred to. Craig said that's not the... What?
Say again, Flatzoid?
I don't think he was speaking.
Pop
so that was the
mute,
citation.
please.
That was the citation that I presented. Craig said that I'd misunderstood it because I'm stupid, and he got all of his gay little mates to tell me that I was stupid, that I'd got it wrong, that I was going to die. This is the death of my channel. Rah rah rah. And this is what they did with angular size. They said the same thing, and I stood my ground because I'm not stupid. I understand what this means, right? Anybody can really understand this, but when you get 10 people telling you that you're stupid, you do question it. You do wonder, have I missed an angle here? Is there something obvious that I'm missing, that just because I'm biased in favor of challenging the science? And the only thing that they came back with is that when he said, when he says here, and not an invisible force, what he means is it's not an invisible force. It's some other kind of force. It's still a force, but it's not an invisible force. It's just some other force. Now he's saying that basically it's magic, right? And he snaps that magical wand in two. But in the bigger scheme of things, obviously that's a bit of an issue. But think about this with the density tower. When it says here that Einstein described down, or he defined down as the direction in which time passes more slowly, even if gravity was a force, Einstein's science is the current science, and he defines down not to be to the center of the Earth. He defines it to be the direction in which time passes more slowly. So in the context of the density tower, and whether or not there's some bit of bias that's influencing the initial acceleration, it's not going down to the center of the Earth, according to the current science. It's going down the direction in which time travels more slowly. So whatever that means in this context of the density tower, it's clearly it's not applicable. But this is the current science for gravity. So whether or not there is something that's pulling these moving eggs and all that, it doesn't matter. Whatever it is that might be doing it, it's not the current science. There may be some other cause. And it's brilliant because the ball earthers can't even challenge us, because we're doing this argument is within flat earth. It's not even to do with the ballers, so they can't even criticize us. So whatever's going on here, it's clearly not gravity, because gravity's not a force. I love it.
Hey, Anthony, when you see the video, you're going to see what I'm about to say. When I was watching this, and this article you just posted is giving me my thought right now. In this article, it's on paper. He had time to review it before he submitted it. On the actual interview with Craig on Fight the Flat Earth, he's leaning forward into his camera. He's very relaxed. It's as if they both had enough martinis so they can just talk casually. And the truth came out in that video that he would never put in this article. This is a death blow.
I guess what we really need to do, we need to collaborate with Bob from Globebusters, because he's got a big audience too, with Jaren from Jarenism, because he's got a big audience, and for all the other people in the community that have a big audience. And we need to push this out there, because if this guy says that gravity is not a force, it literally changes everything. Now, obviously, it's already there. The text is already there. But from 1920 onwards, scientific community accepted it. Regardless of whether we think it's right or not, their science tells us that that's the position, right? We obviously don't even accept that, but that's what their position is. So they can't go back to the pre-1920 position with scientific acceptance, because they always say scientific consensus is what we accept because there's no reason for us not to, right? Well, the scientific consensus is that it's the bending of space-time that causes this gravitation perception, right? Which is not a force. So the scientific community and the scientific consensus tells you it's not a force. So why is it that you keep bleating on about Cavendish? Why is it you keep calling it a force? Why is all the maths including G? Why is all that called forces when it's applied? All that is nonsense. So what do we do from here? Because this is, like you say, this is a killer blow. It literally removes Cavendish out of the equation. So for all the flat earthers, let's not let them talk about Cavendish anymore, because it is antiquated science. It's old hat. It's not the current position. You need a little bit of bendy space-time.
Yeah, now we have a new quote. Gravity is not a force. George Musser, 2019.
Magic.
Let's just preempt what they'll say.
No, it's not a force, but you can imagine it to be.
Yeah, it's not a force, but you can imagine it to be. Let's preempt what all the idiot ballers on our side against us in this topic will say. They'll say that we've just repackaged it the way that
Google
we're saying
search.
they have.
Yep.
They will present to their audiences that we're repackaging a loss as a victory, which is exactly what they're doing. They're repackaging a loss as a victory. And they're all stupid. But the reality is, he literally says it's the opposing position. And I don't know how honest people that have got any faculty of mind and any intellect or common sense whatsoever can interpret gravity being a force and gravity not being a force. It doesn't manifest itself as a force. It isn't a force. You can't calculate for it being a force. You can't claim weight as a force, because gravity is not a force.
This is
I was just going to say.
This is a perfect.
Sorry, I was just going to say, if you Google search imagine, to form or have a mental picture or idea of something, so you can have an idea of it being a force, but it's not actually a force. You can imagine it being a force, though. Leave you fundies to your imagination.
I love the bigger picture in this, because it just so happens to coincide with the density argument and whether or not density is a force or not. Now, my position is that you increase the density and that creates a disequilibrium between the amount of pressure that one against the other creates, and that's what makes the egg move. Now, they're all saying, no, density is not it's not a force, it's not a force. Well, if gravity is not a force and we are changing the density, right, it means that you're now trying to infer that there's an additional cause that's not even a force. So what's making the egg move if it's not the salt that I've added, which has added a little bit of density below it, which has created a bit of a pressure below it, and it's pushed the egg up? If that's not what's happening, and gravity's not a force neither, what's making the egg move?
I was going to say, if anybody ever wanted an example of violation of the law of non-contradiction, this would be one of the biggest, easiest one. It's this, but it's not this in the same relationship.
So it reminds me of the older lady in the 90s when she was, I'm going to have to get it, Nathan, you have to play it. Do you remember that line that she said, everybody has a problem with this? I'm going to get it, because this is basically, and I applied it in my video. I said it's directly against the ballers. It's so apt right now. It's unbelievable.
Something about they don't ever think about density. They don't remember density, and it's very important.
Yeah.
Something like that.
There it is. I'm going to get it on screen right now. Here we go. Come back to it in a sec. 1 sec.
No worries. Just let us know when you want it presenting and I'll stick it up. It's only about 3 or 4 seconds anyway, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's fine. Been a great couple of shows. Very relaxed. It's nice winning.
Whee.
I'm sure the Globers are not relaxed.
That's because the illogical cannot exist in reality, and that's what that show showed.
Right, Nathan, here we go. So let me flick screen share on. This is aimed at school kids, right? But you have to apply this against ballers in the context of whether or not gravity is a force and the effect of it not being a force. Because if it's not a force, it doesn't do anything, right? So this woman is talking about density being the reason why things float or sink. Now, she doesn't use the word buoyant ever. She constantly uses the word mass, and she constantly uses displacement, but never buoyant and never gravity, right? It's what she doesn't say that's important. But when she wraps this up by concluding, she's basically contextualizing this thing, these experiments she's doing to do with gas laws. And what she now says is aimed at school kids. Apply this to everybody that claims Cavendish, that believes gravity is a force. This is what she's saying against them, and it directly applies. Let's listen to her next 2 or 3 sentences. She's referencing the children, but let's change it in our minds so that she's referencing the ballers instead. Because in this case, it's the ballers that are the children. Let's apply her words against the ballers, the priests, the idiots.
That's a tough one for them. They have to remember density. No matter how well you drill density into their heads, they still have a problem with that. So this could actually be used.
They still have a problem with that. And that is exactly the problem we're faced right now. People don't remember density. It is the cause. They want us to believe it's gravity, but we know that it's not.
Excellent stuff. You want to spam the link to that video, or I'll do it if you like, so I'd have to approve it. If I've still got it up, if not, I won't. Yeah, I have. So that video.
Hey, let me ask a question of clarification, just because I can imagine they are going to accuse you of cherry picking. What was the difficulty, right? They have difficulty with density. So
she's describing how density is causing whether an object floats or sinks, right? And what she says is everybody wants to, it's what she's not saying that she's referencing there. She's not saying that there's a buoyant force. She's not saying that gravity is pulling something down and creating a counter net force, which is what they tell us. The ballers tell us that. She's literally saying it's density that's causing things to move up and down, right? And it's relative to the medium that you're in. You can change the density and it'll either add weight to it or remove weight to it. But the minute we say weight, they then apply maths, little g. But by doing that, it ends up being like gravity. So what she's doing is deliberately not using the words that they use against us. And then she says, people have got to remember density. They have a problem with that. And they do. Everybody believes it's gravity, and it's not.
Even uses the words less dense or more dense, right?
Yeah. Less
never
dense,
says gravity, never says buoyancy, none of that.
Yeah. It's a fabulous clip because it applies directly to all the morons that think there's a Cavendish experiment. That's not really an experiment, but even if it was, it doesn't prove that mass is attracted by mass. Because if it was, it's not gravity, because gravity is not a force. It's honestly, the effects and the ramifications through the community is big there, and I'm loving it. And it basically allows Bob in the density buoyancy egg thing that Bob and Jaren and deep inside the rabbit hole. Whether it doesn't matter who's right in this case, because we can allow Bob to beg the question with whatever electromagnetic he wants, right? Or any alternative. It's spitballing, right? But it's definitely not gravity causing it. So anyone that might think that there might be gravity on flat Earth, right? This is the position. We don't need gravity, but they absolutely need it to keep the atmosphere onto the sphere. Because if there's no atmosphere being held on by gravity, it goes off into space. It fills the available volume.
Gravity doesn't do that. No, why are you making this argument when that's not an argument that they can use? Gravity does not hold the atmosphere on. You can't defy the second law of thermodynamics with gravity. That's not ever been part of the narrative. There's even citations, which I don't have at my fingertips, that completely piss in the face of that, Anthony. So no, that's not why they need gravity. That's not what they
but what I'm saying is when we ask them, why does the atmosphere...
They need it for the balls. They don't address the gas pressure.
They need a force to be pulling the atmosphere back on.
Yeah, but that doesn't work. That doesn't mathematically work if you presuppose all of it. So it's literally incorrect even by their own standards.
I know, but when you ask them what's their answer for how you can have gas pressure next to a vacuum, they always come back with gravity. Now we can say gravity's not a force.
That's like saying ships go over the horizon.
It doesn't matter. When they say that, I say, show me. And they go, oh, well, you just have to imagine it. Well, no, that's fine, but that's not a useful argument, especially when I can find citations that basically piss in the face of that. Gravity will not defy the second law of the second law of thermodynamics. You will still have entropy taking effect regardless of their claimed force of gravity.
I agree with that.
So it's not suddenly an undoing of that argument. That argument's solid and strong without that. It doesn't need it. But what it does do is just piss in the face of everybody that claims that it's a force, which they do.
That's what I'm saying. And when they say gravity,
Anthony, just one more thing. So when you say they need gravity to explain it, and Bob can have electromagnetism or whatever you said to explain it, just tell me what it is that they're explaining.
It's not gravity, is it? That's my point.
No, just listen to my question.
It is a clown.
Hold on. What are they explaining? What is it? You said they need gravity, and Bob can use electromagnetism to explain it. So what is it? In quotes.
It's this bias that begins to make a movement.
What bias?
They say people believe.
I've got to slow down there. What bias? I generally observe equilibrium. So what bias are you talking about when I observe equilibrium?
It's the nanosecond when it starts to move. That thing that kicks it is what people argue must be a force because it's moving.
Hold on. You've ignored my point. When it moves, I've just said I observe equilibrium. I'm looking out my window right now. Nothing is moving. So what are you talking about? What movement? What bias?
All right, okay. Do we really want to do... Right, I can't really argue their case for them. You would need Bob and Dipra to be able to argue their case for themselves, because I'll probably butcher it. So I don't think we can really have this conversation and argue their case for them.
However, do you know what they say it, in quotes, is? What are they explaining? What is it?
Yeah, some universal force that makes the initial kick.
That's their explanation. What's the it that they're explaining with that explanation?
Well, they think there's an electromagnetic bias in Dipra.
That's another explanation. You're giving me an explanation. You haven't given me the it yet. What is it? What is the thing that they're explaining with that?
The phenomena that is that an object appears to be stationary, but then appears to start to move all by itself.
That doesn't happen.
Well, it does with the egg, doesn't it?
No.
Well, the egg wasn't moving. I added a bit of salt.
You added a bit of salt. Right. No worries. You added a bit of salt. Now explain where this happens in nature. Where does that natural phenomena happen? Where do I see the bias, the disequilibrium, naturally occurring?
So objects moving all by themselves, you mean?
Wind. Things in nature do that all the time.
Wind's the interaction, isn't it?
So what you're saying is when something is in disequilibrium, it will displace relative to its medium.
Yes.
Yeah.
Solved.
So where's the it? I'm still not getting an it out of that. Yeah, things generally are in equilibrium, and if they're not for any reason, they will seek it. Now, the direction they travel depends on the medium, so it's sod all to do with anything to do with direction. That's medium specific. So what's it? What are they trying to explain?
I don't know, but what I can do is plug the idea that's coming up. I believe they're having a big discussion about it on Globusters on Sunday. So I'm sure they'll be able to answer that question. I'm sure if we contact them somehow that they will address that specifically.
Okay, well, just as a preface to that, if it is in any way, shape or form somebody coming along and forcing something out of equilibrium, then I'm just going to hand wave dismiss it immediately. So if, for example, like Anthony's just done, he says, well, I put salt in and the egg moved. No, the egg was perfectly happy before he came along and did something. Nothing changed. It was in equilibrium to begin with. Now, unless you can show me an example where something's out of equilibrium for whatever reason, usually given as the example of an apple falling from a tree, or conversely, if you have a leaf at the bottom of a lake and its leaf detaches, it'll go up. In other words, medium specific. So isn't attributing a direction, it's relative. But I want to know what the it is. Now, we've spent 2 shows laughing at the fact that they don't have an it. There is no it. There's just this magic that they can imagine. So, now that we've absolutely pummeled, based on their own rhetoric from George Musser, this fantasy of gravity, their it, I want to know what our side of the arguments, it is. And if it is forcing something out of equilibrium, I'm not interested.
I hope you're listening, Jaron, because this is like the first part of the scientific method, isn't it? Observe the phenomena. Where do we see something falling into a state of disequilibrium if it was previously in equilibrium, or otherwise fall into a state of equilibrium if it wasn't in equilibrium? Where do we see that actually happening?
No. Hold on. You've danced over my point. Hold on. You've danced over my point. No, I've already explained that. So no. That doesn't give me an it. That's why I went through it and explained it. It's medium specific. So there's no going to be any directionality attributed to that effect. And if you study that effect of the cause of a leaf detaching at the bottom of a lake or an apple detaching from its stem on a tree, that is the phenomena that you will be studying. That is the phenomena. So from there, I'm not going to be getting some other magical thing like gravity that we've just pissed all over, are we? Because that's the phenomena. Now, you can suppose some magic. Now, I'm not going to tolerate that. No. If the phenomena is a leaf detaching at the bottom of a lake and going up, then that's your phenomena that you're studying. You tell me the cause of your leaf rising in a lake. If your phenomena is an apple falling, that's your phenomena. What's the cause of the apple detaching from its stem? No worries. Isolate your independent variable for that phenomena and tell me what caused it, and I'll accept it. So long as it's been through the scientific method and you've established the cause of that effect. That is the effect that's being claimed, though. So when we get to the stage that somebody goes, I'm going to imagine a magical force of down, I will just hand wave dismiss that shit immediately. That's all.
Okay.
That should be done because it literally doesn't exist.
Yeah, I do agree with your point, Nathan. My point was simply that when they claim that they can now have the atmosphere of the Earth being held on, when they claim that they can have the atmosphere of the Earth being held on by gravity, if gravity is not a force, that kills that argument. They absolutely need a force to hold the atmosphere on. Now, I know you're not going to like it, but it stops a lot of arguments if we can literally cite Musser saying that gravity is not a force.
There is no force.
I know.
It's not that gravity's not a force. The explanation still stands up, though. Everything still works, and there's no gravity. So there is no force.
I know, Nathan, but they believe there is one. But if gravity's not a force, then they've got a problem with the atmosphere.
I don't even know what they believe, technically.
They'll believe.
Apparent, or there would have been objections on the faces of those who heard him out. They don't know what they actually believe. What they
believe, Arwin,
is
you're trampling all over Arwin. Sorry, go on, Arwin.
And the whole point is they don't know actually what they believe. They just believe that there must be something, whatever it is, or whatever it turns out to be. It must be there, even though they don't really understand what it even is.
They believe anything that they're told, so long as it supports their story. They will genuinely believe that George Musser somehow supported Craig and Craig beat me, right? So the bigger picture is it kills gravity in all aspects. The littler picture, the little boy picture, the little crusade between me and Craig, because they've presented it in a way that makes it look like that somehow Craig's won, they will still believe that Craig's won somehow. I will still get trolled comments, regardless of whether or not he actually did win. I'll still get the trolled comments saying how stupid I am.
Anthony,
don't believe anything.
Don't troll bait. It's up to you if you're going to do that. You're going to troll.
No, I'm encouraging it because it identifies all the dumb bastards that believe anything. It's all the gullible bastards or troll accounts. People on their side will believe anything. They are the most naive and gullible people ever when it comes to this topic.
Yeah. So that's pretty obvious.
Right, in the face of Anthony's very topsy-turvy emotional ride through this George Musser video we've been discussing, I'm going to say a huge, massive, enormous thank you to all of you in the live Nathan Oakley 1980 audience for tuning in. Hopefully smashing the super chat, liking, commenting, sharing, subscribing, and all that good stuff. Be sure to stay tuned if you are watching on the Nathan Oakley premiering stream, as there will be an after show to follow. If If you need to keep yourself occupied after the live stream, then go to nathanoakley.com and check out the Flat Earth Debate Forum to keep up to date with the community debate. I've been Nathan Oakley, and I'll see you all in the next video. Stay tuned if you're watching on Nathan Oakley.
Oh, what a day! What a lovely day!